Well, hello, lovely listeners. Welcome, viewers. I have another fantastic guest today. I have Anthony Webber with us today. Anthony is a broad-based independent political commentator. He writes articles and he comments on written radio, TV, and online media. This is mainly non-mainstream and foreign media, as obviously, as we all know, the UK media is very reluctant to allow independence and alternative political perspectives. And we've seen that massively over the last 5 years. Anthony gravitated into this field after an extensive and varied careers in business, finance, sales and marketing, and politics. Topped up by devoting time to, I don't know when you've slept, Anthony, sports, cultural, social, charitable, and other issues, and also works as a business, personal, and political consultant. You're also a member of the Electoral Reform Society, and you've got several years' experience in varied election work, such as Presiding Officer. And since the scamdemic, he has been active in truth, freedom, and justice causes and continues to do so. Very active in a number of causes, and obviously one recent one being to end the UK government's involvement of the UK in Ukraine. I know it's just absolutely bonkers. So there is a petition that Anthony is going to be encouraging people to sign, and I'll obviously be sharing that as well in the show notes to make it nice and easy. Lastly, to say, originally from Guernsey, I've never been, it's on my bucket list. And you were an independent member of the Guernsey Parliament for 13 years, which sounds very grandiose. And you now live in the East Midlands, so not too far from me. And you've kindly shared that you're divorced with 6 children and you have 4 grandchildren.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Anthony. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thank you very much, Mel. And I love the name Never Settle because most of us are people who don't settle for, what's presented to us. We don't put up with it. We do fight in
Yeah,
whatever way we can. So
yeah.
you've hit the nail on the head with that title.
Thank you very much. Before we go any further, I always say please like, comment, share, subscribe because it really, really helps this channel to grow. I've been really pleased with how it's organically growing now on a daily basis. It's brilliant. And I get the most wonderful comments. I also get shit comments as well, by the way. You trolls know who you are. But mainly the positive outweighs, which is great. And if you're feeling flush, buy me a coffee /Mal Clark. So back to Anthony. Welcome again. And I would love to know a little bit more about your backstory. And, as I always say, what were those pivotal moments really that got you to doing what you're doing now? You've clearly had a varied career in the corporate world, myself included. I was in sales and marketing as well for over 20 odd years. So, yeah, I'd like to know really, who you were and what was it that sort of got you to what you're doing now. So over to you.
Right. Well, I think going back to when the pandemic, so to speak, was starting, I was sort of very concerned, like a lot of people, but also because I'd been politically active and I'd been an elected member of the Guernsey Parliament, I knew how much work was involved if I did re-involve myself in politics. So I was a little bit reluctant. I was hoping that the thing would go away, like a number of people thought, and also I was hoping other people would, you know, do their bit. And at the time, I was writing one or two articles for the Conservative Woman, and the editor of that's called somebody called Kathy Gingell. And I was talking to her one day about the need for coordination of what was going on in the truth and freedom movement because there seemed to be so many people doing so many different things, but not the coordination there should be. And I myself, I didn't go on the first big march, but I went on the second big march. I think I sent you a picture of one of those, but that's where it became very apparent that the mainstream media was censoring what was going on. And I indeed found at the time I was living in Leicester, trying to get in touch with a local Leicester group, and I noticed that even when they had some publicity, the local paper conveniently made it very difficult to contact the people concerned. I later discovered there were three groups there and they didn't know about each other. Now, you wouldn't have that in any other situation, but everything was done to stop us cooperating with each other and fighting back. And that's anyway. Going back to my discussion with Kathy Gingell, I was agreed that I would, with one or two others, set up something called the National Alliance for Freedom, which was aimed at bringing about better cooperation and coordination between groups. And we started off very well. We had literally 10 Facebook pages with different regions of the country, literally thousands of people who were supporters. But unfortunately, we became victim of what's happened to one or two groups that, something went on in the, whether it was infiltration or whatever the reason, but one of the people involved who had got involved with the Facebook groups basically shut them all down. So we left with one, which was set up separately. And at the time, I was very involved with helping other people anyway. And I've always found a key issue with any political matter is finance and organisation. And if you haven't got it, then you might be better off helping other people who are more established. So it was always the intention to try and get National Alliance back up and running again. And a few of us did do our own activities, but we more focused on helping other people. And in fact, that was always the aim anyway, to improve cooperation and so on. So I got involved because I felt I had to, because I was just getting frustrated. And it's still the case today, unfortunately, that there's not enough cooperation and coordination. And even if you look at organisations like Together, you find they focus on one or two areas, but they're not broad based. Like if you went on some of the really big Truth and Freedom marches, the ones where you had 500,000, 1 million, you could see that it represented a broad cross section of the population. We weren't Liberal, Conservative, or Labour. We were basically people who couldn't care less about all of that. We were going to work together for our nation's freedom and truth and so on. So very sadly, a big opportunity was lost because all those many people who came out, a lot of those contacts have not been obtained or been lost. So we are left with a number of groups who are doing sterling work. And one of the things which came out at the beginning is I got involved with something called the Movement of Movements, which was a very below the radar group of mainly organisers, but some influencers in the Truth and Freedom movement. That was set up by somebody called Jo Rogers from Lawyers for Liberty. And she was very well respected, and a lot of people were very involved. But for some reason, they didn't really want to come out from under the radar. They were too concerned about security issues and so on. I personally didn't agree with that. Since then, we've become more open and have open meetings. But there were some successes. I mean, people might remember the Jobs Not Jabs campaign. That was all behind the scenes done by the Movement of Movements, Jo Rogers, Dan Austin, Gregory, one or two others. So, and obviously I got involved as well. But there's been some absolutely great work done by people, but it's just a shame that we haven't got the sort of unity of purpose which we could do with. But that's life, really.
Well, it is life and it is frustrating. What do you think the answer is, Anthony? Because like you said, there's lots of different groups all wanting to do good things. And then you have I've seen it myself. Like if I use like the example of Rachel Alno, for example, who is going to be on next week, actually. I'm interviewing her next week. She obviously started the Love Party for those people that are aware of that. And but I think prior to that there was something else, and that got infiltrated, and it it boggles my brain. I think when you live in our world where you just want to do right by people and we just want an easy, peaceful, free life, right? That's all we want. And to go about our business without being interfered with. And then you've got people that are starting good movements, and then you get these arseholes that come in that try and infiltrate it. And whether that's because they've been paid to disrupt or whether they've just come in with a big, massive ego, who knows? But what do you think the answer is? Because there are, like you said, there are so many different groups, and they're very often specialize in a certain area, and then somebody else is specializing in something else. Because you can't be a master of all, because that will always
Mm.
fall away anyway. What do you think the answer is? I like what you were saying about the movement of movements, but and trying to coordinate and trying to get this more collaboration. Do you know what the answer is? Do you
Uh,
know how to do that, effectively?
obviously personalities come into play, and people needing to rise above that, but also it's having people who command the respect, and people will go along with it. I think one of the issues we've had in the truth and freedom movement is a lot of people don't like perceived authority, being perceived as being instructed what to do, sort of thing. And so you more need to be seen as somebody who is respected for giving good advice. We certainly had that with Jo Rogers, but she's unfortunately sort of very unwell. And, a lot of that's happened with a lot of people. We've had some key people who haven't been able to carry on for health or other reasons. But I think going back to uh, the Love Party, I think basically what we're looking at is the Freedom Alliance Party, which was set up with very good aims and objectives, and Love is a sort of result of as one of the splits they had.
Mm.
Um, I personally think that it's not necessary to fall out on these things. That if you want to be a large party, then you just got to put up with some differences of opinion. And I think the Freedom Alliance Party deserve a huge amount of credit because very early on they recognised the need to get involved in the political process, because there's no point in just protest and then come election time, the people, local council and national level, they're all people who supported lockdowns, vaccine mandates, and so on. So it's essential to have elections, and I think why we've had these problems. Yes, I think the establishment definitely infiltrates and pays people to do this. They've done it for many years with all sorts of organisations. So there's no reason to suppose they wouldn't have done it with the Truth and Freedom movement. But it is upsetting when people put a lot of work into things and then it's destroyed sort of overnight. I think also I think that the Freedom Alliance Party, I mean, obviously it's still going, um, but they were at one time very defensive about the money issue, in the sense that they quite rightly said, well, we, survive solely on money given to us by our supporters. But one of the things I think we all have to be accepting of is, if we want to be successful, we've really got to have ways of getting money in and not expect people to do things for nothing. Because a lot of people have got families,
Yeah.
Or even if they haven't got families, they still need to pay for food that they eat. And right at the beginning, going back sort of 3 years or so ago, with a lot of the organisations, it was everyone was saying, "Well, I'm doing this for nothing. I'm not doing," but you just cannot achieve big success without having recognizing that the labourer is worth their hire, and you can't take advantage of people. I've seen this in my own working career where having people work for me, obviously paid, but it's made me more efficient. And it's the same if you look at the general political career. Um, MPs have some of them even have about 7 assistants to make sure they do their job better. And it's very few Truth and Freedom organisations who actually pay either expenses or salaries. But to me, that is the answer. Everyone else under the sun who is engaged in the political process recognises that you can't get things for nothing, even with people being very well intentioned. I think the lesson, I think, is to not be defensive about getting money in to pay for people, and yeah, demonstrate the results of that by all means, but and actually try and get the fundraising. And you have to accept that a lot of people haven't got that much money, so therefore, if there are people who can give £100 rather than £10, that's all going to help. But I'm not giving any points for or against reform, but you can see one of the reasons why they've made vast progress is because they've recognised you need to have money to organise things. And, you're talking about organisation across the country in many different areas. So uh, it is you can't run even a local council election for nothing, let alone national one. So I think that's one of the key provisos. And I have actually noticed quite a few people I know have got involved with Reform UK. Yes, some of them have got involved with the Workers' Party of Great Britain and other organisations, but there's more and more of an understanding that if we can kick out key government ministers, as happened at the last general election, and we had 6 independent MPs voted in and 5 reform ones, it shows that the people have got the power to reclaim their government. And I very firmly believe that with these local elections coming up, people should be standing, whether it's independent or another party, and try and get back what we need to have, which is truth and freedom and justice. And the only reason we're in, well, it's not the only reason, but one of the key reasons we're in the state today in our country is most of us have sat back and let, a bunch of idiotic traitors run the country at local and national level. Obviously, there's exceptions to that, but if we value what we've got in our society, then we have to fight for it, and that does include fighting on the electoral front. And I think sometimes it's very difficult because you get somebody standing, it might be somebody in reform, and you think, well, I don't actually represent everything I want. But I would argue that if it's a question of having them or somebody who's worse, then you pick the best of the worst options. So, but I also,
Okay. Question for you, Anthony.
yeah,
So you've mentioned reform a couple of times, and obviously, whatever happened in the UK election last year, well, I believe it was totally rigged and all the rest of it, because who the hell wanted that knobhead in? But the whole thing, it's just different talking heads for the same thing. So first question is, what do you actually think of reform and Farage? But the other question is, even if we all came out and voted, and even if there was enough numbers to vote for, say, an independent or whatever, and I know there are good people, and I've thought about it myself. I've thought about actually running myself, or joining something like the Love Party or David Britton's party. I can't remember what that's called off the top of my head.
Heritage.
Yeah, and so, but then you're like, and you're like, we've all just sat back and let these arseholes run the country, because in your mind you're sort of thinking, well, okay, I could step into that world, but it's like stepping into a nest of vipers, and I'm going to get slaughtered, if I'm literally a lone voice. But if nobody steps forward, then we're always going to have the same old shit. But at the same time, I also think, are elections fair? Even if people did stand up, and even if people did come out and vote genuinely for something different, would they even get through? Now, I know that we did get some through on the last election, but was that all by design? Was that to give us a little, oh, let's show the public that they've got a bit of control here, and then we're just going to swipe it away at some point anyway? So there's a lot there to throw at you. So sorry for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, no, that's all right. I mean, I think your point about fair elections is very true, because you look at what's happened in Romania, where they've actually stopped somebody from standing for election because they're so frightened that they'd actually get elected. So that's the sort of thing which is going on in the EU. And behind the scenes, there's a lot of people who feel like that in the UK who are in power. And it's very similar to why in America, the Trump supporters are rolling back on what's been going on behind the scenes, in that there have been anti-democratic processes at work. Or I'm not trying to mention them all, but you don't have to be on President Trump's side to agree that elections should be free and fair, and there shouldn't be any undermining of society. I think going back to the elections as a whole, well, first of all, if you look at parish councillors, hardly likely to be any manipulation of votes there. Then if you go up to the next level of local councillor, where you are paid, um, uh, then again, it shouldn't happen, because being involved with the Electoral Reform Society and knowing lots of people, and the process for um, being able to vote and check the vote count, and the ability of candidates and their agents to check every part of the voting process, including the postal voting, the chances of things being manipulated get less and less every year, because certain things have been um, improved. Like there were a few years ago, there was a case of, I think it was Hackney or one of the London boroughs, where there was mass fraud on the postal vote side, and that sort of thing. They're much more alive to than before. But there is another thing which I think we need to be concerned about, and that is that if we accept that we, the people, have the power, then clearly the establishment don't want us to use it, as what happened in Romania. So they will put it about. Will use their agents on social media to say voting is a waste of time. Now, that at the last election did irritate a lot of truth and freedom fighters who were actually standing for election, to have somebody on their side saying, don't bother to go out and vote. And what happened if they missed out being voted in by 5 or 10 votes because somebody was telling people not to vote? And not to vote is actually the same as giving a vote to your opposition. It's as simple as that.
I know we say that, and I've said it myself, but there is a bigger part of me these days that just thinks they're not fair anyway. So even if you did get up and vote, and then there's another thing, you're actually putting an X in a box.
You
It,
can put whatever you want. It doesn't have to be an X.
but
Uh,
but it's not you. You're in the box, you know. So if you go into the legalese and all that sort of stuff and the forms, we're not. That's not even, you know. That's a dead person who can't vote anyway, sort of thing.
Um, I can just, what I would say to anyone who's critical of the system, it's not that difficult to volunteer to get involved with it, because most local authorities do want people to help. They do actually pay a small amount for it as well, so you're not really sort of out of pocket. But you know, some people actually get quite irritated at how meticulous the checking is. And for instance, when you're having a vote count, you have what's called a verification process before you even start counting the votes. So there's quite a process there. And at any stage, the candidates can ask for recounts, and they can go and check on any pile of votes they want, basically. And you know, it's just more and more difficult to manipulate the voting process. And all I can say is it's probably not impossible, but I'm somebody, when I do that, I think of every possible way that somebody could do it, because I'm a keen question everything sort of person. So you know, that's what we need. We need people elected who are people who are going to question things, who are going to improve the system. But the point is, it is if you look at, say, local elections and the power the local councils had when we had the lockdowns and so on. Now, if we'd had Truth and Freedom as running local councillors, they wouldn't have been able to operate the lockdown policy or anything associated with it. So even on a local council, it's actually important. And I think even, you know, you mentioned if you're a lone voice, I think sometimes if you're a lone voice, you actually encourage other people to not be so timid. People who are
Mm.
on the fence, they come off the fence. But it's what I would say is clearly the turnout at the general election went down a little bit, but still, you know, we've got quite a huge number of the population who vote. And it's quite clear that with a number of the constituencies that they can change hands. And I think one of the significant things is a lot of us thought with first past the post would never unseat certain people. But to give you an example, in Leicester, the Shadow Health Secretary lost his seat, and to me, that was people power. And he was one of the most pro lockdown people out. And I'm quite sure that one of the reasons he lost his seat was because a lot of the Truth and Freedom people voted for his key opponent, who so happened to be an independent. But I think we've got to just look at the fact, yes, 5 Reform MPs got elected, and that was the vehicle which a lot of people used to exercise their protest. So instead of not voting or defacing the ballot paper, which achieves absolutely nothing at all, and I can assure you of that, because I'm somebody who looks at them and nobody takes the slightest bit of notice, including the candidates. What they do take notice of is if they're voted out of office. And I was on a programme with Unity News with David Clews and 1 or 2 others when we had the election night. And the number of government ministers who fell was fantastic. And we cheered like anything every time one of them fell, because we felt that it was done by the people, you know. So it wasn't a perfect situation. The perfect situation would be to have 650 Truth and Freedom as MPs, but it's this has only just started. What was it? Only 3 or 4 years ago did we have the terrible COVID lockdowns and so on. People weren't into politics on the whole. I'd say most people in the movement had never really been particularly into it. So a lot of people have learned, and there have been a lot of mistakes made. You know, going back to the Freedom Alliance Party, I would say the major mistake has been not to focus on what people are really interested in, which is the economic situation, and that's the way to win elections. You have to focus on what's going to get people to vote for you. It's all down to marketing, and I mean, you look at, say, the Labour Party; they got in, but they really downplayed their Ukraine policy to the extent they hardly said anything at all. They said the things which were going to get people to vote for them, but they've got elected, so now they're doing all the awful things they either didn't mention or they downplayed. And I think what the Freedom Alliance Party should have done would be to go on uh, saving people money, because the policies were going to save money anyway, so it wasn't going to be untruthful. But to go on about COVID type issues, I don't think should have been a major thing in the election, because unfortunately that's something you can do once you're in. Once you're in, you can educate people, you can put things right. But otherwise, if you do otherwise, you'll just be labelled as a conspiracy theorist, and um,
But
it's not really fair. But that's we have to get people elected, and as long as they do the right thing when they're elected, that's the main thing to me.
so what about Farage then and the reform? Because obviously there was that growing popularity a few months ago, um, and we all, or a lot of people thought, oh, they might get this, they might get this because, he's saying and doing all the right things. And especially in the truth movement, everybody knew that Keir was going to be even worse than the Tories.
Mm.
But, other members of the public weren't aware of that. And then Farage is Trump's best mate and all this sort of stuff. And then since then, he's come out with a few clangers and things to make people going, what? So what's your thoughts about Farage? Is he a goodie or a baddie?
Personally, I don't think he's got the charisma he had some years ago, but I do give him credit for sort of coming out of retirement and doing what he thought was his bit. And we have to be thankful for the fact that because Reform UK did stand, um, there's been a bit of a semi-political revolution in that they got 5 MPs elected, and who knows, with a bit more effort, they might have done a lot better than that. But I think it's demonstrated that the people can vote in a new party. I think Nigel Farage at the moment is sitting on the fence on far too many issues. But you look at President Trump in the United States. Now, there's a lot of things I don't agree with President Trump, but I do agree with some of the exposés which have been going on. Now, if he'd in the election focused on all of those things, I suspect he may not have got elected. He focused on what were the election issues, but now he is elected. All these various things are happening from, you've got JFK as the Health Secretary, you've got Tulsi Gabbard in a key intelligence position. You've got one or two good people. I mean, some people felt that Tulsi Gabbard should actually be the president of the United States. So he's some of his team are pretty good, but I don't think Nigel Farage has got the influence he did have with Donald Trump, and I think part of that is because I don't think he's been as supportive as he should have been regarding the Ukraine peace initiatives. And it may well be that the Reform are just sort of sitting on the fence on certain issues because they think that when the elections come along, they'll get the votes anyway. I don't know, but I personally think they should be coming out and demanding a referendum on the Ukraine-Russian situation. They have done on net zero. If they were seen as a party which believed in referenda on key issues, I think that would get a few more people supporting them. Because even if they don't agree on certain issues, at least it acknowledges that we've got a broken political system, which is based on first past the post, which means that we don't really get fair representation. So if we had something close to the Swiss model, where the population actually do vote on important issues, then I think that gets around it, because a lot of people forget that when they vote for MPs, they're voting for constituency MPs. They're not actually voting for a party, they're voting for an individual. And it just so happens a lot of those individuals are members of political parties. But I'd like to see a situation where there's more independence and as it is standing, and I would like to see the alternative vote system where you vote for people in order of preference for constituency MP, and that way you'd get the people's most preferred choice as MP. If we'd had that system, we certainly wouldn't have had this huge Labour majority. But I don't sort of have to beg to differ with you slightly in that I'm not convinced that Kemi Badenoch it would be much better than Keir Starmer, because it's only been, I think, today or yesterday that they've come up with saying they don't think net zero is achievable, whereas they're the ones who started it all off. But on a lot of the issues that we're in a mess on at the moment have been started off by the many years of Tory misrule. So, in my opinion, they're both as bad as each other, and
Oh
very
yeah.
much.
I
Yeah,
don't I don't disagree. I don't disagree
yeah,
at all. They're all a shower of shit. But Kia, I think, has been pinpointed to come in and do all the chaos that he's doing now. And we kind of knew that. And obviously he's got those connections with Savile and all that sort of stuff. He got
yeah.
him off and and all of this. And people seem to not even be aware of that and just be voting him in. And it's like, well, come on, this guy is clearly a wrong 'un. That's all. They're all the same. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's hard to know. It's really hard to know who to vote for. Like you said, not voting at all is giving one to the leading party, and I get that. But at the same time, when you don't trust any of them, I mean, many years ago, I put Mickey Mouse down on a form because I was just like, they're all just an absolute joke. Um, but anyway, so politics is obviously a massive topic that could take weeks and weeks and weeks to discuss, and we probably would never get to any kind of resolve or agreement because there's so many bloody variables and things are in such a mess and everybody's got their own agendas and to go to what you are getting more involved with, and that's the sort of the collaboration, but also the petition. So the particular petition that you've shared with me on email, which one's this for?
Well, the petition. I mean, I've been involved with other successful petitions before, but one thing I will say about petitions is they're the most cost-effective and time-effective means of process, because they take 30 seconds. And you imagine you go on a process and you're traveling from Newcastle to London, that's a day out to go for a process which may or may not go well, which may or may not have some influence on the government. You can have just as much influence by signing a petition in 30 seconds for nothing. I'm a great believer of petitions in coordination with process. So one of the ones I was involved with Dr. Tess Lorry, we had a brilliant protest outside Parliament when the petition was actually being debated. That was to do with who, and that's an ongoing situation, as we know, because America have said they're withdrawing. But with reference to this current petition, which is only just a week old now, which I'd really like people to sign and share, if people are absolutely fed up with the UK not being put first and money being spent on the Ukraine. We've had admitted by the government 12.8 billion spent on Ukraine, with an ongoing commitment almost forever, well, is forever at the moment, of 3 billion a year. Ironically, that's very close to the figure the government are going to be trying to saving on the disability welfare benefits. So anyone who wants to protect welfare benefits, they should be supporting this petition. But it's some people say that the bill for Ukraine is more like 15 to 20 billion. I mean, to start with, it costs $1 billion to pay for the 300,000 Ukrainian refugees who are in the country. And it's interesting, most of them came to the country after Boris Johnson messed up the peace talks, which were about to be signed, until he flew over with our money to offer to prop up the government there. But one of the worst things about the Ukraine-Russian policy of the government is they've got involved in a foreign conflict, which there's no strategic or economic interest in the UK being involved with. You could argue that it's much more in our interest to be involved in Afghanistan, which only costs us $1 billion a year, because we're at least protecting women's education, women's rights, and various other things like the right to vote and so on. But anyway, going back to the petition, one of the problems of the government having sanctions against Russia is it has rebounded on us, and it shot up the price of energy and cost of living. And anyone needs to basically look at the cost of energy and cost of living back in February 22 and look at it now and see that there have been absolutely horrendous increases. Now, the first year that the energy prices went up, the government gave a little bit of a stop and tried to help quite a lot of people with quite substantial payments which were from taxpayers anyway, which
I'm
could
going
have
to
gone.
say you call them substantial, Anthony, but when they're trying to charge you £3,000 and you're getting a 200 quid subsidy, it's not.
Yes. Oh, no, I completely agree on that. But notice that this year there's been hardly anything at all, yet the prices are still going up. So they've really conned the British public. And at the time of the last election, they didn't say much more that they were going to continue to support Ukraine. They didn't actually say the consequences of this policy are financial, and spell out the financial aspect, and this is why I think if there was a referendum on the issue, people would vote for the UK to become neutral and to stop all these treaties which give the Ukraine so much of our money. And I think one of the very key things is if people believe in peace in the world, at the moment, our government, and that's 4 governments under 4 prime ministers, have contributed to what could only be described as genocide in the Ukraine, because 1.6 million Ukrainian casualties so far, and we're complicit in a regime there which is overdue with having elections, has cancelled 12 opposition parties, cancelled opposition media, so nobody who opposes the government in Ukraine is allowed to have a say. Yet we're propping up this government, because if American and other aid disappeared, they would last probably a week or two. That would be it. It's we would actually be saving lives, not just Ukrainian but Russian as well, if we went about trying to bring about peace. And one of the key things about this petition is we've been censored on this issue. It's virtually impossible to get a proper debate on what is in the UK's interest. It's never been in the UK's interest to take sides in Ukraine and Russia. Yet we do need to have a debate on that with both points of view put forward. But if you go back, say, 30 years ago, we were trying to to have very good relations with Ukraine and Russia. We had all the members of the royal family visiting Russia. We had Her Majesty the Queen and Prince Philip. We had Prince Andrew, and King Charles, various other members of the royal family. President Putin came to Buckingham Palace. Now, for some reason, a few years ago, somebody decided to change the policy of recognizing that it was good to trade with Russia, have got good economic and friendly relations, and they changed that to one of being antagonistic. There's a clue to that in that I think that those vested interests have got big stakes in Ukraine, big stakes in the minerals and resources there, and that's been shown by the fact the EU had signed a deal with Ukraine in 2021. Of course, the UK government signed one in the beginning of this year, and President Trump wants to sign one himself. And President Putin has offered the Americans to have one with him. So clearly, the war's never been about values or democracy or whatever. It's been about minerals and resources and global power. And it's this blatant dishonesty which we've been fed by the government and helped out by the media, which I think is grotesquely immoral. And it's something we really need to stand up and fight on. But it is one thing where the intelligence services have got people at such a broad level. They've got on social media, even on a local level. So you try bringing out the subject and somebody will pounce on you. That's how sensitive it's got. But if you look at what's happening in America, where they pulled the funding for these sorts of things, that's what we need to do in the UK, pull the funding for these people who are supporting the globalist agenda. And the globalist agenda is not going to suit the Ukraine people either, because basically the UK government policy is one of privatisation of resources in Ukraine. So it's an asset stripping operation of Ukraine. Now, who in Ukraine, whether on the front line or not, is going to want to sell off their assets to other people? Why would you fight for that? No reason whatsoever. So it's time for truth and honesty on Ukraine and Russia. And I find it's interesting that people are so terribly dishonest, and it's, to me, it's just not acceptable.
Yeah. Well, I don't disagree with you. I think the whole Ukraine Russia thing, we probably know less than a tenth of the truth on that. Will the truth come out one day? Who knows? But do you think these petitions work, Anthony?
Well, they work from 2 points of view. First of all, you have to understand that we never had petitions a few years ago, so it's been a move forward for democracy. But you also have to be realistic with petitions. For instance, somebody recently, and I helped them with it, got 3 million
I
signatures
was
for.
going to ask you about that.
Yes, well, noticed that that petition was highlighted by every single national media, every single local media, and of course it got to 3 million because the powers that be saw it as no threat whatsoever. And the reason for that is at the election, about 9.5 million people voted Labour. So unless you got 10 million people signing the petition, it wouldn't really have any merit. So it was basically asking for too much. And it's just, you can't expect to have a general election 6 months after
Why
you've
not?
actually.
Why
Why
not?
not? Because it's not in, you have to change the constitution first. I mean, funny enough, there is another petition to have elections more frequently. But I personally think if people, it just say 10 million people did sign the petition. And I said this to the petitioner. I said, you know, if we can get 10 million people, we've actually got a case. But with other petitions, it's different because there hasn't been a general election on most of these other political issues. So you're starting from fresh. And the public comment, for instance, on the Ukraine matter, they've never been asked to have their say on it. They've never been asked to have their say on net zero. And they've never, for instance, with Tess Laurie's petition, they've never been asked to have their say on membership of the World Health Organization. So it's a valid thing to have a debate on. And where you're actually asking for a referendum, it's very difficult for the government to argue there shouldn't be one if it hasn't been an election issue, which a lot of these things were not. So this is why you've got the Reform Party saying they would have a referendum on net zero. But what I'm saying is we need to have them on other issues. But I think petitions are a means of getting things debated in Parliament. At the moment, on this particular issue, the debate is absolutely deplorable, and it would force the issue, because what happens with parliamentary debates is the Petitions Committee allocates an MP to put the cause forward in the debate, and they have to discuss with the petitioners what they say in that debate. So you're actually getting a debate. I mean, you can't expect to have a change of policy on 100,000 signatures, because basically there's petitions around saying we should rejoin the EU with 100,000 signatures. So you've got to look at it in its wider aspect. But what I think we could achieve much more if more people were prepared to give that 30 seconds to sign the petitions. And we've had debates on the farmer issue and so on. But you can't sort of, it's stage one to get the debate and to get MPs discussing it and so on. But to actually get a change, that does actually sometimes happen with petitions. And I'm sure the Petitions Committee could give quite a few examples of where somebody's signed a petition and it's done quite well. And the government's thought, well, they put a reasonably good case forward. They have changed the policy. Admittedly, they're on not so important issues. But what happens with petitions is they have to have a government response once they've hit 10,000 signatures. But sometimes they're debated even when they haven't got 100,000. So there's a group of us who are quite involved in the whole petition process, and we regularly keep in touch. And we have noticed that the whole thing is actually getting better. So that's why is it getting better, because people are exercising their power and engaging with that committee, and basically that they're making the situation work as well as it can be. But what I would like to see is it evolve into a situation where if you get 500,000 signatures, you do get a referendum. And there's an organisation called the Direct Democracy Group who are campaigning to have something similar to Switzerland. And that's the end intention of the petitioning process. That's one of the things we're campaigning for at the moment, to make sure that you do legally get a referendum when you get a certain number of votes. But in the short term, you're just getting a debate and maybe some government action. But what I can say is, when I've had responses on previous petitions, they made such a terrible response that it's encouraged more people to sign the petitions and expose the government's failings. Because if you look at, say, freedom of information requests, what you actually get with government responses is very similar to what you get with a freedom of information request, except you do actually get the petitions committee who will go back to the government if they think their response is inadequate. So I myself have had instances where the government have had to make another response because the first one was not sufficient.
Mm.
So not a perfect situation,
No.
but it's no different to if you ask people to come on a protest and they make the effort to do so, and that helps in some way. I mean, you could argue that hardly any protests have had any effects at all, but it all adds up. And with a petition, yeah, as I said, 30 seconds of your time, and you're helping your colleagues who are quite happy to do all the fighting up front, etc. So, as I said, not perfect, but we must use all the ammunition which is laid before us.
Yeah. And I wouldn't disagree with that. The skeptic in me is sitting there thinking, yeah, well, they pulled it at 3 million when that petition was supposed to be up for 6 months. Where's the democracy in that? And
No, no, it hasn't. It's still there. It's just they debated it early. If I'd been the petitioner, and I did say to him, I would have said to him, look, can you ask them not to have it debated so early? But to me, it was all a put up job to discourage people from signing petitions, because if you get 3 million to sign a petition and you perceive it doesn't achieve anything, you're less inclined to sign petitions. Well, that was the whole objective of that operation. I mean, why else would literally all the media push it when we've had a number of petitions, anything from the WHO one I mentioned to the COVID laws themselves, probably about 10 or 15 freedom type petitions. Not one of them have got mentions in any of the mainstream media, TV, radio, paper, whatever. They've all been censored. And I can tell you that just I did a check one day that GB News did actually mention that petition the first time, and the next day the petition went up 20,000. That's how much influence the media have, and they know it, which is why I'll be amazed if this one appears in the media. It will be offered to them all, but it's the same as if you get somebody well known with many social media followers. If they push a petition, that can suddenly
yeah,
get about 5,000 signatures, which is why it's very important for people who are listening, however many followers you've got, please put it on social media. Um, and if it gives the establishment a little bit of a kick in the teeth, then that's that will do to me.
well, before, I mean, we're at the hour, so before I bring this to a close, just a final comment on what you said earlier. You said about, well, we can't just have a referendum or a new election because that goes against the Constitution. When has the government ever given a shit about the Constitution? Because I've been in court myself these last 12 months. They don't care. So I think it's one rule for them and one rule for us, and we've always
Well,
known that. So
it definitely is. It's two-tier justice, and that's exactly why we got to get rid of the whole structure of government,
yeah,
the current MPs, current councillors. But we can do. We got some good people out there. I mean, you yourself have thought about it.
yeah,
Instead, we'd be far better employed making decisions for the people rather than criticising
yeah,
the people who are making bad decisions. And it extends to all sorts of other things because we've got the awful genocide going on in Gaza at the moment, many other problems in the world. We've got Christians being killed along with some other minorities in Syria. It's interesting how the government's fixated on Ukraine and it is ignoring problems elsewhere in the world, which includes the Sudan, it includes the Congo. It's terrible that the government doesn't seem to care about anything except Ukraine, and there obviously is a very terrible, mysterious reason for that. And I think you go back to what happened with it came to light that certain media personalities were paid to go and visit Ukraine. We need to check on, how much money has gone potentially to our politicians to support Ukraine, because it's completely unacceptable. They're looking into this in the United States. We should be looking into it in the UK as well.
Totally agree. Well, thank you, Anthony, for educating us all in this last hour. It's I am a massive skeptic, but I do agree with you that the more people that can be out there doing something, it has a ripple effect. And I'm all for that. It's all about paying it forward. So if people want to know more about you or read some of your articles, see some of your videos, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, I'm sure they can via you. You can put them in touch. But my Twitter is Tony underscore Webber. Facebook is Anthony David Webber. My email is Anthony Webber. That's all one word at CWG S for sugar Y for Yankee.net. And I think that will do for the moment.
Okay.
And welcome as much support as possible, and let's all keep on fighting together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll share the petition as well.
Really lovely, thank you.
No problem at all. Well, thank you again, Anthony. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much. Thanks, Belle.